Hello everyone, this is Gene. I'm back with another video. I know, amazing. I actually do have hair under that blue scarf of mine. For anyone, especially those who are new, I don't wear the scarf for any like religious or cultural reasons. It's not like a hijab or something like that. The reason I wear it is because I'm terribly lazy and I don't like doing my hair. Right, so I happened to take a shower a few hours ago, and the hair came out not great, but well enough. So I don't look like how I usually look when my hair is loose and I'm at home, which is I look like I was electrocuted. It's basically how I walk around at home since don't have anybody to impress. But the reason I'm making this late night video is sort of spur of the moment. It's because I've been having this very interesting conversation with Paul Sebert or Seber. I don't quite know how you say it, right? But according to this, Paul is a comics blogger and whatnot. So he and I have been having this conversation about 6 Days in Fallujah and the attempts to cancel it. Now, well, that I should say it's been two things. It's been 6 Days in Fallujah and the attempts to cancel it, and a lot of our conversation prior to this also focused on edginess in media, right, and how controversy uh, it gets attention, right? How many famous people, whether they be musicians or pro wrestlers or whatnot, have gotten famous because they have been edgy and controversial, right? Not because they have been good, clean boys and girls, right? As the classic song says, "Nice boys don't play rock and roll." But this is just sort of a summary, just to give an idea of what led up to the part that I'm going to talk about here, because while Paul and I have been disagreeing, I want to be clear. It's been very wonderful, respectful disagreement, and I am always in favor of that. I love having conversations, even if I don't agree. At times, especially when I don't agree, because even though I may not agree with a person, the disagreement and the respectful interchange, right, interaction allows me to sort of get an idea of where this person's coming from, even if I don't personally agree with them, right? So this is sort of a summary of how we got to this part that I'm going to focus on here, right? So after going back and forth multiple times, um, Paul says, look, sometimes when an often maligned group, which I believe in this case would be Arabs, right, when it comes to this game, says don't, you should at least listen to their concerns. Which I responded with, why should I? Or rather, and why should I? And why should I when the supposed representatives of said groups make outrageous claims about future racism and violence they can't prove? Personal offense is no reason to cancel a game. Plenty of things offend me, but I don't call for the cancellation of them. Now, I wanted to respond to this part because, this is Twitter. You can only type but so much, and I'm not a big fan of Twitter threads. So here's the thing. Believe it or not, this is a situation where I kind of agree with Paul and I kind of don't. And here's what I mean. I view things like um, let me try to figure out how to say it. I think that when it comes to creative endeavors, right, that um, it is nice if a creator shows a certain courtesy, right, toward a real life event or culture or whatnot, right? For example, if you're going to do a story about, say, ancient Japan, right, and you're not Japanese yourself, right? I think it's a courtesy, to do research on the topic, right, to make it more authentic, right, to learn more and whatnot, right? I do think it's a courtesy, and generally speaking, believe it or not, I do believe that if a maligned group, right, if a minority group says that you should not do something, you should at the very least hear them out. I don't think you should make your decisions, your final decisions about what you're going to do in a work, or in this case, whether a work should be released or exist, just because of how they feel about it. But I do actually generally agree with hearing them out. But it's only when they have something to say, because in the end, from a creative standpoint, from a creator standpoint, it's one of those things where it's like you're not obligated to. If you do, if you do hear them out and you do decide, hey, maybe I'll change this element, or maybe I won't release this work until I've made some changes, I think it's a courtesy, but it's not something that you are required to do. I am not required to hear someone out, right? If I do hear someone out, and if I do take their concerns under advisement, I am being nice. I am extending a courtesy toward them. That does not mean that I am in any way required or obligated to do as they ask, right? My giving my attention, right? My saying, hey, I will hear you out, is already me extending a kindness that is not required of me. That's how I view it from a creative standpoint. And again, generally speaking, I do think we should be respectful of each other, especially if we're going to be taking inspiration from cultures that are not our own. But at the same time, we have to, I think, remember that again, any hearing out, right, from a maligned group or a minority group is a courtesy. It is not a requirement. Right? As the saying goes, sometimes it is better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Right? As a creator, I am not obligated to get anybody's permission, right, to write anything. Quite quite frankly, right? That's the way I view it. I don't need permission to make a creative work from anyone. That I take someone's feelings into account is a courtesy on my part, right? It's not a requirement. I don't have to get your permission. But I can be nice if you give me a reason to be nice, right? And as I said in my response to Paul, right, in this case, I don't feel there's a reason to hear out the people who wrote the petition to cancel 6 Days in Fallujah, or those who have signed it, which is now what, over 16,000 people when I did the last video. Uh, Especially as I said here, right, when they make outrageous claims about future racism and violence that they can't prove, right? As I said, personal offense is no reason to cancel a game. Plenty of things offend me, right? But I don't call for their cancellation. Resident Evil offends me, right? For various reasons: the blood, the violence, the zombies, right? But no one's gonna cancel that game series. Capcom is gonna cancel that game series just because I'm personally offended by it. Same way J.K. Rowling's not gonna, scrap Harry Potter just because there are Christian groups or religious groups that take offense, understandably so, right? That take offense to the use of the occult. Same way Disney's not going to scrub all of their old films of all the magic and occult references and figures and whatnot just because again there are Christian groups, which would be a minority, right? And by Christian groups I mean like Christian groups that are like outraged, right? Most I think just look and just go whatever, and they just move on, right? But there are some groups that are very outspoken about these things, right? And it's not on Disney, right? For example, to hear these particular groups out. If they decide to, that's nice of them on their part, but they're not required to, right? In fact, I think one of Disney's huge problems has been the fact that they have been acquiescing, I guess the term would be, way too much to the bad faith complaints about how prominent female characters, I should say, were depicted during their 90s heyday, right? During the 90s Renaissance, right? Which is why we have all these remake films, right? Beauty and the Beast. Even prior to that, right? There was Cinderella and Maleficent and all this other stuff, right? But especially recently, within the past like 4 to 5 years or so, there's been this real push to remake their 1990s catalog because that was their last real big hit time. Right? It was the Disney Renaissance, so they remade Beauty and the Beast, and they totally revamped Belle and made her more feminist than thou. I did not like it. Right? They revamped Jasmine, right? And most recently, as we saw last year, right, they totally butchered Mulan, right? While claiming that they were trying to be culturally accurate and respectful because the first film, the first animated film from 1998, played very fast and loose with the cultural accuracy and the cultural references in the film. Now, I am not Chinese, obviously, and I'm not going to act as if I have, some exceptional knowledge of Chinese history or culture, but I've watched many, 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 many videos from Chinese people about the live action Mulan film, and the general consensus that I've gained from those videos is that Disney's live action version is not a good film, right? It's not a good film as regards representing the Ballad of Mulan accurately or respectfully, or representing Chinese culture from that time respectfully, right? Whether it's the engraving on the sword, right, being wrong, or their misapplying or misapplication of the rabbit um, uh, comparison about how like a male and female rabbit running in a field. There are differences, but when they're both running, you really can't tell what the differences are, right? Or the one, what's the one that's really popular? Oh, the whole thing about chi, right, and how chi is not the force like in Star Wars, how chi works in Chinese culture, and again various other things and complaints, right? But here's the thing: the problem is with that is that Disney made this overt promise to be respectful, right? This film, now that we all know what it turned out to be, was never going to be good. But I think Disney probably could have saved themselves a bit of grief if they've never made this overt promise to be respectful toward Chinese culture, right? Having that promise out there, right, made people much more mindful, right, of what Disney was doing because they now said it. Hey, we're going to be a lot more accurate and respectful to Chinese culture in this time period. And then they got everything wrong, from the costumes to the various sayings and no music and everything. I have seldom come across a review that was actually in favor uh, of this film. So there you go, right? Sometimes it's better to simply ask for forgiveness than permission, and sometimes it's simply better to just do the damn thing instead of to make promises about cultural accuracy and sensitivity that ultimately you can't keep, or in the case of Disney, you never had any real intention of keeping, right? But moving on in this conversation here. So then Paul says, future racism and violence is something that's hard to prove. Not really. There's this things called statistics, right? Crime, people involved with tracking crime and whatnot know this, right? The police or the FBI, right? There's crime statistics, right? But he says, future racism and violence is something that's hard to prove. But when you've had people with this kind of experience, I listen. I'm a cis white dude. I'm a white cis dude. He says, I've been blind to a lot of things and taken stuff for granted. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. I don't care, quite frankly, if you're a cis white person or not. That is not going to sway my opinion in anything. In most instances, my question is, what is your argument? What are you trying to prove to me? And what what's the word I'm looking for, right? What is your evidence, right? What is your argument? Is your argument made on solid ground, or is it simply you being histrionic, right? That's the thing, yes. Racism and violence can be difficult to prove, but the various studies, and I've mentioned this in 2 videos now, that are currently out about video games and violence have been largely inconclusive. All they have found is that they make gamers a bit agitated and more aggressive, right? Rude behavior for about 15 to 30 minutes afterward. If that's all you can find at present, right? And again, I have yet to hear a killer, right? These sadly, murder is always in the news, right? I've yet to hear about a killer say, "Hey, I was inspired by Mortal Kombat, or I was inspired by GTA, or Duke Nukem, or Doom, or Call of Duty, or Gears of War, the various Halo, various shooters out there, Battlefield, the 100, or whatever the heck they're up to now." I've yet to hear anybody cite a video game, a violent video game in particular, right, by the type of video games that get labeled as murder simulators, as reasons for what they do. From what I do know of racism and violence and how it comes up, from what I know of, it's from very real world things, like growing up in a broken home, being taught that certain races, in particular your race, is greater or better than others, and that others deserve to die or deserve to be harmed or lesser than, right? From what I know of racism, I'm not going to act as if, all media is good for a person to watch. Certainly not. But that's up to each individual. But again, I have yet to see where media is in particular video games in this case, right, is so complicit in the corruption of a person's mind, right? To the point where it drives them to commit acts of serious harm and violence. Again, from what I know of racism, it's something that many people are raised up in. And that's how they come to believe in it. Or in some other cases, right, a person might be very young, maybe they're a teenager or a young adult, and they feel ostracized by the world, right? They feel ostracized by the world, they feel rejected or forgotten or for one reason or another, and then a charismatic person comes along and tells them what they need to hear, or what they want to hear, right? Takes an interest in them. And then what happens? This person who's a very toxic influence starts saying, "Hey, these problems in your life aren't your fault. They're the fault of this person or that group or this group or anything else," right? We see, racism being bred into young people, sadly, through our education system uh, currently, right? Or in the workplace, right? It can be things such as uh, required trainings that are less about actually bringing people together and fostering respect and more about, bashing white people, right? Things like disown your whiteness, or things like that, right? Disown your culture, or this idea that white people, culturally speaking, are a monolith, right? That is type of racism I see in the world currently, and none of that, to my knowledge, is supported or encouraged in any modern video game that I know of, or certainly any video game that I ever played growing up. When it comes to violence, well, again, I think that a bigger predictor of violence than a video game is something like someone coming from a broken home, someone struggling with mental issues, right? Take for example the song "Jeremy," right, by Pearl Jam, which was about a real young man who actually did kill himself in school, right? Although the circumstances were a bit different in real life than they were in the song, right? But if you look at the song, right, it talks about a boy, who is disturbed, right? It talks about him drawing these violent pictures, right, and all this stuff, and how his parents don't pay attention, and how he's bullied in school, and all that stuff. Real world stuff. Nothing mentioned about, oh, Sonic the Hedgehog taught him hatred, right? Nothing to that effect, right? So I would say that if you want to um, take a stand, I guess, against racism and violence, make sure that you raise your kids, if you have any, in healthy, happy homes, and don't raise them to think that they are inherently superior just because of their gender or the color of their skin. Right? There are many things, sadly, that can lead to radicalization and racism and violence, but I've yet to see where video games, where most of them come out of freaking Japan, including the companies, right? Nintendo, Sony, Namco, Konami. These are not Western names, right? I fail to see where video games, either as individual works or as a whole, contribute to these problems. Again, if someone can show me evidence or make a decent argument, I'll listen, but I'm not obligated to hear you out just because you're upset and offended, right? And then I responded with, as I've been saying, right? I'm all for listening, right, when I'm given a reason to listen. No one is entitled to my sympathies or understanding on a matter. I refuse to believe or behave as others do because of my skin tone or gender. Those offended by the game, this case being 6 Days in Fallujah, for any reason, have the right to not buy it. And that's basically, as I've said in several videos, how I feel about this. You don't have to like the game. You don't have to like um, the people involved. You don't have to like the subject matter. You don't have to like the perspective that it comes from. That's perfectly fine. If you feel that it's pro American, pro invasion, disrespectful, you are entitled to your personal opinions about the game. That is of no issue. I will not at all try to change your mind, or try to tell you how you should feel about the game. My issue has been, and my issue continues to be, the fact that people are trying to cancel this game. Over 15,000, over 16,000 people are trying to call, I guess, use the voice of the masses, right? Right? Use the voice of the masses to cancel this game for no other discernible reason than they don't like it. Again, outrageous claims about how it's going to teach gamers to be racist. And before they amended the petition, how gamers were going to grow up hating Arab people, and wanting to kill them, and all this other stuff, right? Again, making claims that they can't prove, right? To use a crude New York City saying, or at least I associate it with New York, right? Writing checks that their ass can't cash. Not a good idea to write such a thing, right? Because again, coming from New York City, we have a belief in, if you're gonna come at me, you better come correct, right? You better be able to actually put up or shut up, right? Right. Prove what you say. Otherwise, you are going to get embarrassed and quite possibly hurt, given the neighborhoods I grew up in. Them's fighting words was a real saying, and a real thing. But anyway, right? And that's the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye.